So let's dive into what I'm calling the great supply chain mystery. We've got this powerful technology, blockchain, that was supposed to revolutionize our global supply chains. But, years after all the hype, it seems to have stalled. In this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly why that is and what it might actually take to finally get things moving.
And look, the stakes here, they couldn't be higher. The supply chain software market is on track to be a $100 billion industry by 2035. This isn't some small niche thing. We're talking about the backbone of a multi-trillion-dollar global economy that is, frankly, bleeding money and is desperate for an upgrade.
And there's this two-sided pressure cooker situation forcing a change. First, the pandemic really pulled back the curtain on just how fragile everything is. And second, you've got new regulations coming down the pipe, like the EU's digital product passport. This isn't a suggestion. It's going to make transparency a legal requirement. Soon, companies will have to prove where their products came from and how they were made.
So, this brings us right to the heart of the mystery. If blockchain technology offers a system that's cheaper, faster, and way more trustworthy, basically a perfect solution for these problems, why isn't it everywhere already? What's the holdup?
Well, the answer isn't simple. It's really a mix of some pretty big challenges that, for our purposes, we can group into three main buckets: complexity, good old-fashioned fear, and a pretty uncomfortable truth about how business gets done. Let's start with the most obvious one. This stuff is just incredibly complicated. As Nathan Williams puts it, you're not just trying to understand complex tech. You're trying to smash it together with the world of policy and regulation, which is a whole other universe of complexity. And finding people who are true experts in both? Almost impossible.
Then there's the psychological side of things. Think about it. The core feature of blockchain is that records are permanent and can't be changed. As Ward points out, that's just, it's scary for a business. What if you mess up? In a regular old database, you just go in and fix the error. On a blockchain, that mistake is there forever. That kind of fear makes companies really, really hesitant.
We also can't forget the history here. Back around 2017, there was this massive hype cycle. A bunch of big companies launched these high-profile pilot projects that mostly went nowhere. And that left the industry with what experts are now calling traceability fatigue. It's a deep-seated skepticism that makes it hard to get anyone excited to try again. And this really gets to a fundamental problem. For the longest time, the tech industry was just fascinated with its own creation. It was a classic solution looking for a problem. People weren't asking the simple business question that Andre brings up. What is this actually useful for? They were disconnected from what companies really needed. And then you have the massive PR problem. The word crypto just comes with so much baggage, right? People immediately think of speculation, NFTs, even Ponzi schemes. So the companies trying to build serious, valuable tools for businesses had to constantly fight that stigma, trying to explain that the underlying blockchain technology had nothing to do with that world and everything to do with things like compliance and trust. But, maybe the biggest hurdle of all is the one people don't like to talk about. It's what one expert we looked at called the ugly truth. And it's the idea that a lot of companies, no matter what they say in public, might not actually want total transparency. And here's why. Sam explains it perfectly. The way supply chains are set up now, with all these layers of middlemen, it creates what's known as plausible deniability. It lets a big company say, "Oh, we had no idea there was child labor in that factory," or "We didn't know about the deforestation." Full transparency with blockchain, it gets rid of that legal shield. And for some, that's a risk they are just not willing to take. So when you put it all together, you see it's not one single thing. It's really a perfect storm. You've got extreme complexity, you've got business fear and crypto's bad reputation, you've got a history of focusing on tech instead of business needs, and then you have the ugly truth that maybe not everyone wants the lights turned on. Okay, so with all of that working against it, what's the path forward? Is it even possible? Well, the experts who are actually in the trenches have a pretty clear strategy for how we move past the hype and start creating real-world value. And it boils down to this really pragmatic 4-step playbook. First, stop talking about tech and start solving a real-life business problem. Find a specific pain point that's costing a company money or sleep. Second, make the solution radically simple to use. User experience is everything. If it's complicated, nobody will use it. Third, focus. Pick one industry, learn its language, its problems, its people, and become the expert for them. And finally, you build trust the old-fashioned way, with small, successful pilot programs that actually prove it works. And the thing is, there are no shortcuts.
As Andre Vani Robin puts it all comes down to hard work. You have to pick your lane, really understand the unique headaches of that industry, and then do the tough grind of building and selling a solution that actually fits. So, who's ultimately going to force this big shift? The experts are pretty much in agreement on this. While consumers demanding ethical products create a pull in some smaller markets, it's really regulation that's going to provide the big push we need for mass adoption. Laws and mandates force everyone to get on board, not just the people who want to. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the reality of how we shop. We all want to save the world, but when we're standing in the aisle, price usually wins. Trying to rely on shoppers alone to change these huge global supply chains, well, it's just not a winning strategy. So this brings us to the final and maybe the most interesting idea of all. What if the real tipping point for this technology isn't something we choose, but something that just becomes totally inevitable? The argument here is that the thing that will finally push this technology into the mainstream won't be government rules or what we buy at the store. It'll be a much bigger, more powerful shift that's already happening in our economy. And here it is. Nathan Williams makes this really compelling case that as our economy gets more and more automated, the machines making the decisions are going to need clean, trustworthy, real-time data to function. In that world, knowing exactly where a product came from isn't just a nice-to-have for a PR campaign. It becomes the essential fuel that makes the entire automated economy run. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. Maybe all this debate about whether companies will or won't adopt this is just temporary. As the world becomes more automated, as AI starts running more of our commerce, maybe total, provable transparency in our supply chains stops being a choice and simply becomes an economic inevitability.